Hello, everyone. This is Shoshana-Nissenbaum. Welcome to my podcast, Divorcing with Dignity. And today, I'm privileged again to have a great conversation with Jeff Friedman, who today, in his capacity today, is going to be our guest Mitzaim Hori, a parental coordinator. Jeff is coming with a world of experience and knowledge and education, and being literally at the forefront of the field of parental coordination. So we're going to pick up from our previous podcast, and this might end up turning into a therapy session, Jeff, for me, because I had a very interesting Hanukkah vacation where I was planning on having a vacation over Hanukkah, and a number of couples that I am the parental coordinator for them, or the third party, or I represent one of them. Wow, the fights that came out this Hanukkah of all kinds of what we call in Israel shtuyot, these little things. And great parents, good parents, who just get completely sidetracked from what is in the best interest of the child to, it's important to stick to the rules. And we'll talk about the balance of sticking to the rules versus the best interest of the child. But being a real stickler for the rules, or even I had this one couple where one of the parties would not reveal to the other party when they are dropping off the children halfway between Hanukkah. So it's like, well, are they coming at 3 o'clock? Are they coming at 5 o'clock? Are they coming at 6 o'clock? 7 o'clock comes, no answer. I'm not saying, right? So maybe we could run through a few different scenarios that came up, and you could give us your expert advice of what is the right thing to do, which is the best interest of the child, short-term and long-term. So first example, okay, and I'll just use parent one and parent two because it could be a mother, could be a father. In many of these cases, it was both. So we have parent one and parent two, and in their divorce agreement, they have no special provision for what happens on Hanukkah. Most divorce agreements, and any divorce agreement that I will do or write, will have provisions of what happens during every vacation. But if the agreement doesn't have a change in schedule for Hanukkah, then I would assume that it's the same regular schedule, which is what my client happened to assume. So we'll call parent one is assuming that there's no mention of Hanukkah or Hanukkah vacation in the divorce agreement, so it's the regular schedule. But parent two writes to parent one, according to the law, Hanukkah is always split 4 and 4, so do not pick up our daughter tomorrow when you're supposed to, because she's staying with me one more night because I'm entitled by law to 4 nights. Now, there's no such law, right? The law doesn't say, and there's no law of custody either, right? So there's no law that says parents are gonna have and have. But when someone wants something, they're an expert in everything. So I said to parent one, now parent two definitely has narcissistic tendencies, no question. I mean, I'm not gonna diagnose them, but they're extremely difficult to deal with. They show all of the signs of that, self-absorbed, lack of compassion, lack of flexibility. The gaslighting is unbelievable between these two parents, from parent two towards parent one. So I said to parent one, go to parent two's house, knock on the door, say I'm ready to pick up the child. But if parent two makes a big deal about it, just walk away. Just say, oh, okay, so I'll see you tomorrow. Because it's not fair to the child. And that's what parent one did. I think I just gave it away. That's what parent one did. And in the end, parent two sent a message to parent one, well, you can have the daughter 1 extra day because, you were nice to me about the 4 and 4 split. So what do you think about that?
Mm-hmm. So if I understand the story here, is that there was no provisions made, as you said, in the heskim, in the contract, the divorce contract. It was left open and unclear. So I'm assuming this was the first year of their divorce after is this their first year?
Correct. They're in
Okay.
Shoshana.
Right. Okay. Okay. Which, I often find myself trying to convince couples who have a kind of a tendency toward high conflict uh, and I say convince because I say, you're in a long-term relationship here called a parental relationship, not a spousal relationship. You're now in a different ball game, and we want to play preventative medicine here. You want to have a contract that, first of all, reflects and enables you to long-term avoid pitfalls.
Absolutely.
That's
That's
that.
one of the most important things in the contract is to see איזה הוא החכם הרואה את הנולד.
בדיוק, בדיוק.
Because
Exactly.
the post-divorce cleanup from these bad contracts
Yeah,
is worse than the divorce itself sometimes.
Yeah, and the post-divorce cleanup really has to do with psychoeducation, co-parent education. This delicate transition, this is so difficult. The most problematic period of time transitioning from a spousal marital status to a divorced spousal status. If that separation emotionally is not done well enough, issues are going to pop up, and this is even independent of the character disorders or issues that you had brought up. But
right.
I think we have to tell parents that when problems come up, especially in the first year, and even further on, there are opportunities. You have to say, I know it's going to cause a lot of mayhem and balagan and trouble and trigger all of the difficult emotions, but we need to see it as a ezra milamala to understand what kind of work needs to be done in order to prevent these things happening in the future. So you can't prevent this not happening. Now Chanukah comes up, we have a problem. We interpret the Heskem or non-Heskem in different ways. First of all, who do you go to when you need clarification? So that you don't end up fighting. Is there somebody you trust? Is it the To'enet Rabbanit? Is it Shoshana? Is it Jeff Friedman? Is it the court? Who do you go to so you don't need to escalate into something? And that you have to do your best to say, this is number one. First of all, let's appoint someone. The second thing is, this was not dealt, this was neglected, and we see it became a problem. How do we approach it? I, by the way, had the same issue now with a couple during Hanukkah who have divorced many years, and they had a Heskem, but the kids are a little older, and they had an issue around needing to change it or thinking about changing it, and we caught it in the nick of time but what I find with couples like this, and not only like this, I think you want to try to say, especially if they're young, let's make a plan that at least stretches it for a couple of years. Let's put something that you don't have to every year revisit the issue. And, if they're younger, it might be different than when they're older. If they're younger, even 4 days could be very short, very long for a very, very young child with one of the parents. So I'm not sure if I'm responding to your answer in terms of pinpointing what's the right thing, what's exactly, is it 4 days or not? You have to have skills that you can be able to describe to the couple that your intention is to avoid complexity and misunderstandings.
Right.
And in the interim,
when you're making a contract with a personality disorder type, right, or tendencies, it has to be so clear. Who's picking the child? Who's picking up the child? What time? Exactly what time is going to be, and something that I noticed now, and I actually met a wonderful woman who's also a parental coordinator, who has a service that she offers where she actually, for little children, she will transfer the children from one parent to the other so that the parents don't see each other and don't end up getting into some kind of fight, nasty looks, even bad vibes,
Yeah,
which children can pick up on. And,
yeah.
and parents, this is how I feel, we are obligated to do everything we can in order to lessen the stress and the conflict of the child. It's hard enough for the child to be a ping pong, going back from house to house. If there's anything in our power that we can do, we have to do it. We're obligated.
So, there's a correlation. You're pointing to a correlation between personality disorders and boundaries. The
Yeah.
greater the particular personality disorder, the more stringent and perhaps even rigid the boundaries and clarification of times, particularly around interspaces when you're transitioning, which we know is a huge issue.
And this is what was so difficult with this example that I gave, because parent two has that narcissistic tendency, culture type of attitude. And so parent number one wanted to set a boundary. No, like the child is supposed to come back to me today. I'm supposed to pick up the child and bring him home to my house. On the other hand, to get into a conflict with parent number two is not good for the child either. So which one weighs more heavily, the consistency, the boundaries, or being able to say, you know what, I can't have this fight in front of my child, I gotta walk away. But then the narcissistic parent wins. And they use that. I find that those kind of people prey on good people who know that they won't, they won't sacrifice their children. So they end up using all of these holes. Another example of that, right? You have parents who, according to their contract, if the child is going on a class trip, the parents are supposed to split it, okay? So you have many parents, you have many mothers who will say, well, go ask your father, I pay for everything, right? And they'll go to the father, or vice versa, the mother, it doesn't matter, it goes both ways. They'll go to the father and they'll say, okay, I have a class trip. And the father will say, okay, here's half. And they'll say, well, mommy said that you should pay the whole thing and she's not paying for it. So that father has an option now, right? He could either make this into a whole, big thing and say, I'm really sorry, but according to the agreement I have with your mother, I pay half. Here's the half. And the child might not end up going on the trip because the mother is going to use this as ammo against the father. And so that father has a decision to make now. Do I just pay for the trip and let the mother get away with it again? Or, am I ever going to change the mother? I'm never going to change the mother. But on the other hand, she's constantly taking advantage of me and pushing the boundaries in all areas. Where do I draw the line? But my kid needs to go on this trip. I don't want my kid to miss out on that. The best thing is for the child to go on the trip in the short term, but in the long term, what does that teach the child? What behavior am I modeling? It's so complicated.
What would you advise? So here you advised in this case that the father should kind of, the healthier parent, quote, right? The less narcissistic parent. You said be flexible, go to the house. I mean, why wouldn't he call? She wouldn't answer his calls, I assume, or the WhatsApps, right?
Oh, no, definitely not.
Right.
Definitely not.
So he went there, which is already, you're entering kind of higher risk levels. But okay, you said he's healthier, so he can knock on the door, and if she's too aggressive or she's whatever too problematic, leave the
place. Right.
So I think that, so here it brings up an issue where you have often the healthier, quote, healthier parent says, I'm always being the person making the compromises. So you need a strategy. You need to work with the healthy. You have to say to the healthier person that you need a structure. Obviously, what the existing structure isn't helpful, but you can't let them get too overwhelmed in the particular moment. The child needs to go in that trip for their well-being. let him pay if he or she let them pay for the trip if they can afford to, and they'll have to find a mechanism after, whether it is negotiated with lawyers again. There has to be a balance between some kind of power structure and mediation that's always surrounding these kind of couples. There's a kind of a tension between an imposed, because people who cannot, this law about dyads, when two entities, when two people cannot resolve a problem together, it's going to triangulate. It will always triangulate outward. So here, and that's probably what happened in the marriage, and this is what you want to prevent in terms of damage to kids, because it'll triangulate. When I use the term triangulation, maybe for the listeners, it means that a third party will pick up the stressors that the parents together can't resolve together. In a healthier dyad, in a healthier two-person relationship, you'll contain the problem. You'll figure it out. You have somebody reasonable enough to work, and all these wonderful things. If that's not there, it's going to triangle out, whether it's with the kids, the school, police.
That's a very important point. That when that's incredible. When two parents cannot work out their issues, it's going to triangulate, and in comes the innocent bystanders, which are the children.
Correct, and that's why you're not going to change that pattern very easily, because we're not doing deep psychoanalysis, even if they have the motivation.
Right.
Psychoanalysis, you have to get a professional person to triangulate, unfortunately, whether it's courts triangulate or a mediator or a toenet rabbanit, and they have to get...
Probably a lawyer or a toen would just make things worse.
Yeah, and often often you're left with a lot of helplessness, whoever the professional capacities are. But that's why you need the stringency of law. At what point would the father say, I've had enough, or the mother, who's confronted with an impossible high conflict personality, the other parent? At what point do they threaten and they say, I'm going back to court? If this is not resolved, what framework? We need to resolve this. I cannot pay this every time. We're going to need to do this. Otherwise, we'll be back in court every time.
I had a client who had to go back to court so many times for the stupidest things. The kid needed a private tutor. Father wouldn't agree. Why? Because I'll pay for it. I'll pay for 100%, the mother said. Father, no. Kid needs therapy. Father, no. Kid wants to go on a trip with the school. Father says no, right? Whatever the mother asked for, the father just said no.
Right.
We have been to court around I think over 10 times for 10 different issues. And finally, the judge said to the father, I just want to let you know that I will always side with the mother. And if I see you in my court one more time, I'm going to start taking hotzat mishpat. You're going to have to start paying for her lawyer. Enough, stop.
Did that work?
That was after 5 years of constantly going back to court for every stupid little thing. And they had been to the Yishuv Sichsuch. They were seen in the Rivacha, and it cost her a lot of money, and it was very, very difficult. But she finally got him off her back, so to speak. And now he just doesn't respond. He doesn't say no. He just doesn't respond. So we had another issue that came up recently. I just wrote to the court, and they gave the father 7 days to respond, or they're granting the mother her request. He didn't respond. We got our request finished.
Yeah. So, you see symbolically, the court turned into a very harsh boundary that needed to be mirrored back to this parent that was functioning out of a non-rational and reactive, call it narcissistic, call it a high conflict personality. And we, in the theoretical, when we study these things, it's called differentiation. I don't know if we want to get into these theoretical.
Yes, I do.
Okay, so when you're working with couples, and you are put in a position where you're the policeman, where you're defined by a role. I get cases from the court that I have samchut hachra'ah, which is judicial. What's the right term?
Power. You
What's
can
that?
make decisions.
Judicial powers, because the courts are tired of this. They're going back for every little thing, like you're describing. They say,
Absolutely.
appoint these professionals who have training or whatever, and they're going to make decisions, and you have to follow it. And it turns me into my personality isn't. I didn't study to be a judge. I had to stretch my abilities.
That's why you can make good decisions.
Well, that's why that's why it's such a difficult field. But sometimes you're non-differentiated. The couple, the situation is defining your role as a policeman, as a judge, and
all in one.
All in one, and
there's a phrase for it: the judge, the policeman, and the executioner, all in one.
And the therapist, and you need backgrounds, and the cases where you're defined in a role shows how rigid and limited really the spaces to work with. And in the case that you brought up, it took a threat. It took a threat from the judge to say, I'm going to fine you at enough. And that seemed to have held. And I find that if I have to do a judicial power and decree, I'm basing myself in values. And I say, you're not going to like this. And of course, the person who's problematic will say, you're always on the other person's side. Because the other person is like this, similar to this example that you had given. Wants the kid to have a chug, wants a therapy, wants a more reasonable thing. And the narcissistic parent is taking it as if it's against them. And I have to explain that I'm basing my decisions on a value structure, not on whether I'm in favor. And I say, I can't help you if you're taking it in this way, but this is how I'm working. It's a higher value. The kids will benefit from this, and they deserve to benefit from this. And you have to find a language that the metamori you're not pulled into the conflict and getting drained by you have to be very economic in your energies. Sharing this with you as otherwise you get very exhausted by the repetition. So that's another problem. When you have personality disorders, narcissism, etc., and this is also very important to know, you'll find that there are repetitious patterns. You'll be able to almost predict what will happen. And you need to use the prediction, and you tell this to the healthier parent, to anticipate a response. You use, I know what he's going to respond. I know what she's going to say. You often come across, and if you know what they could say, you'll have independent, more maneuverability. Because sometimes people say, you know what, I'm so sick of this argument, I'll pay for the chug. Just get them out of my hair. And sometimes that's a legitimate response if they can afford to do that.
I think one of the problems with these unhealthy people is, like you just said, they exhaust you, right? You have to be very economical with your energy with them and your time. They do the same thing in court. They have this war of attrition where they are constantly painting themselves as the korban, right? Oh, I'm the loser. I'm the weak one. I'm the victim here, right? They love victimhood. They paint themselves as the victim, and they tire the court system. Now, in the case that I quoted earlier, they tired the court system, and that judge had awareness that this person is exhausting me and exhausting the court system. But sometimes not every judge has, and not every dayan has that sensitivity to realize, wait a second, this person is just saying the same thing over and over again, and they're playing on my emotions, and I'm tired of them. And they get confused, and it's something which I think is very much lacking in awareness amongst, most judges. And there are some, I've seen many men and women who are professionals at pulling this victim card and driving the court system nuts. And sometimes they're very successful at it. And
In
I'm
your
at a
case,
total
in,
loss of like, I can't go into the judge and say, hello, he's, he's tricking you, wake up, you don't see that this guy is, or this woman is full of baloney, right? Like, come on. I can't say that.
well, in your case, it took you're saying it took 5 years.
It took 5 years until
5 years.
that judge said, get out of my court.
Right. So sometimes, I see clients much more frequent than if they were to go to court.
Right.
I could conclude that after, and also maybe I'm more years in the field, and I could already sense my own responses. I see what I'm up against more quickly because I'm feeling my experience in
You
relation
also
to
get it, you
parents.
get, sometimes I sense it and also when a client, when they send me a certain amount of messages and there's no boundaries, right? They have no problem sending like 30 messages in a day, messages in the middle of the night, and it just,
How do you build boundaries for that?
well, I just started in my new contracts. I have a new clause that says any WhatsApp or other communication except for email. They could send me an email whenever they want because I respect that you have something on your mind, you got to get it out. I don't check my emails so often, but WhatsApp, my phone is on me all the time. I got 3 boys in the army. I gotta, I can't separate from my phone, except for Shabbat. And so I have it in my new contracts that any initiation of communication via WhatsApp or telephone calls after office hours, and I'm very clear what my office hours are, comes with a fee of 100 shekels plus tax and is billed at a much higher rate for the amount of time than the other is. And I hope that will
Yeah,
curb.
yeah. Well, it's certainly built in as a Mate Mori, and I have a joint group WhatsApp. They know from the start that it's about time. You're investing time, so you can't allow somebody to exploit your time. They have to know. They have to because it's about taking responsibility at the end of the day.
So I have a case now also where the father is constantly sending the mother nonstop messages, many of them extremely inappropriate, which I don't know why he does this because I already sent them into the court and the court has seen them and they see that he curses her out and is very abusive in his language, but he doesn't stop. He just keeps sending that. He can't help himself, right? Even though he knows he's being watched. I find that very often. Right.
Does the Rabbanut require somebody to go to therapy to tippul in your experience? They need to.
Very rarely for those kinds of things, very rarely. But at least sometimes I can get permission that she can block him on WhatsApp. Because she can't normally she can't block him on WhatsApp because they have to communicate about the kids.
Yeah.
But you cannot communicate with somebody who's talking to you like that. No boundaries, zero boundaries, and I find this often with this type of personality. I had another case where the father was claiming all kinds of claims that he's physically incapable of working and he's, all those great excuses. And I had my son go on his Instagram account and he's doing sports and boxing and stuff I don't even know what, like extreme sports. And I printed out the pictures and I brought them to the Beit Hadin and I said, Your Honors, he can't work because he's in tremendous pain, but he can go skiing and he could does boxing all the time and he's in the gym and I think something's not adding up here. Now he knew I'm watching him. Right? He knew that I'm watching him on Instagram. Between then and 3 months later, our next due, he kept on putting up pictures of himself doing all kinds of things that officially he shouldn't physically be able to do. And it's that to me is like, that's, whoa, personality, narcissist, I don't know what, but are you so unaware of yourself that you're above, you could just lie and you're above everybody and no one's going to notice? And these are people who are very difficult to deal with because you and I, in our professional careers, we could make a boundary, right? I could say, Beseda, you'll pay me an extra 100 shekels every time you send me a WhatsApp message after 5. I could say that. But these parents have to communicate. And communicating with somebody who is so unaware of his surroundings or her surroundings and doesn't care about what anybody else says, and it's only about them, is almost impossible.
So you need consequences. So that's the question about, we're talking about like legal systems and punitive systems, consequences of behavior, and how much achrayut, responsibility, can a person take on and see their entitlement, so to speak. When you have narcissistic issues, you feel very entitled.
Right.
But I'm curious, Shoshana, you're a Toanet Rabbanit, but do you
Right.
ever represent just one side in the court? How does that work?
Yeah, sure.
Oh,
Sure.
okay.
The court the Beit Hadin works like the court. So I represent, most of the time, I represent only one side.
I see. So you're
I
instead of a
have-
lawyer? You're instead of a lawyer.
Right.
That
So,
would-
and it works just like a lawyer works,
I see.
just
Okay.
only in the Beit Hadin,
Right.
not in
Right.
the family court.
I see. So most of your cases are representing one side.
Our litigation cases, unfortunately.
Yes, I see.
I wish there would be more mediation. I'd
Yeah.
rather do mediation, but I found lately that most of my cases involve somebody who is so unhealthy, and usually, thank God, it's the other side, who is so unhealthy that mediation just becomes for them another avenue of manipulation and abuse.
What's the equivalent of a mita'em mori in the Rabbanut?
They use Mit'eim Hori.
They do. Okay.
They absolutely do. It's becoming much more popular there.
I see.
I wish it would be, I wish it would be mandated for a couple months for.
I have one case now from, but I wasn't referred by the rabbi. I was referred by the lawyers, but it's a rabbinic. And I saw your article, by the way, which was very interesting, about the spiritual uses or misuses,
Spiritual abuse.
spiritual abuse, which I think is worthy of a talk. If we're talking about religious people and how belief systems are used narcissistically, not narcissistic. What is the proper use of? Where is religion in relation to these interpersonal problems?
Right.
And
It's very sad. I see it a lot that religion is used to hurt somebody, right? And it's used to keep people in marriages and relationships. I'm talking about now between spouses that they should leave a long time ago. And I do see it a lot between parents and children as well.
I wonder if there's more. I mean, I think the Rabbanut has changed. I know Jerusalem has changed dramatically from the 90s till now. And there's much more forthcoming and trying to be fair and more rights for the women and for the men.
Actually,
more balanced.
To tell you the truth, women do much better in Beit Hadin than they do in secular court, in the family court.
There's been a big change, but I wonder. There's not a lot of education in the world. The religious, perhaps,
There's not enough. There's definitely
not enough. And
it's better than what it was when I first started.
Yeah,
I've
right.
definitely seen improvement, but it's not enough.
It's not enough, and it's very stigmatized, of course, and even more so, obviously, than the secular world, which is a whole other issue about stigmatization. And I hear like from Haredi and very religious or Chardali couples when I work with them, that how the other side, because they're initiating the divorce, even if it's justified, how they're destroying the family and they're creating embarrassment for the child, and
which is a certain kind of that in and of itself is using religion to hurt somebody.
It's avoiding the issue of why the relationship got to the point where they needed a divorce.
It's also denying, we have in the Gemara, we have Mishnah, right, of Gittin. We have the Gemara of Gittin. We have a lot of Sfarim about getting divorced, right? In many instances, it's a mitzvah to get divorced. We're not Catholic, right?
Yeah,
We're not. Somehow, though, it became this terrible stigma, shanda, and that's a tool that people use to spiritually abuse somebody by saying, oh, it says in the Gemara that when a couple divorced, the Mizbeach cries, right? So
Right.
that's a reason not to get divorced, right?
Right.
Because of an inanimate object which cries, right? Which is obviously, it's a parable because inanimate objects don't cry. But so
Sometimes there are tears of joy.
tears of joy. So
Terrible to say, but true.
it's
Yeah.
terrible. It's a terrible thing when a person is being told by society or by their spouse who's abusing them, right? Your divorce is going to destroy the family. One thing which I keep telling my clients over and over again, divorce doesn't destroy anybody. It's how you divorce and how you behave afterwards.
Yeah, yeah.
And having a child grow up in a war zone is extremely, extremely detrimental to their emotional well-being. And if you think you're hiding it, the joke's on you. Because you can't hide things like that.
No.
Especially not in these small Israeli apartments.
Right. No. Yeah, it's all transparent and out there. I keep going back to this separation period of time when divorce first comes up. I don't know if because I guess you see, you're a Toenet Rabbi. Would people come to you because I have psychotherapy training? So sometimes I get the couples that are ambivalent. They don't know yet. That period of time where they're what they call clarifying the relationship. Right. And it's a much better time to work and plan that how-to, because you could discuss the pain. You give a place for the pain and a place for the grief of the ending, of the termination, of a lut. And often these cases that we go with, they're not only a personality disorder, there was no burial process, so to speak, which is sad, which is their sad emotions and helping the couple evolve. Not everything was terrible. We had beautiful kids. We want to, we're going to be in connection our whole lives. How do we accept this more in a more helpful way? With personality disorders, much more difficult, of course.
Right. It's impossible to have that conversation.
Maybe it's impossible even. Right. So they're more normative situations.
But they could have it with themselves, meaning a person could look at their divorce and say, or when they're separating or defining their relationship and where things are going. I think it's a very healthy thing to be able to say things weren't all black and they weren't all white. They were we had good times. Everybody who's married has had good times, right? Yeah, I don't think that they wouldn't be married. Maybe it was overshadowed, but there were definitely moments of connection. And even if they were not madly in love anymore and they're not in love at all and they don't even like the person and they even hate the person, if they're going to be honest and mature about it, there has to be a recognition that things weren't all always horrible. There were something that we shared.
That's why I think a modeling, so to speak, because when you're talking about high conflict personalities, it is impossible. It's very, very difficult. And but what is a normative, healthier? I think we need to get what could we do if the couples that do have more potential? It's not black or white, even with high conflict. What educational, so to speak, psychoeducational principles can we as professionals help couples with? What
I saw this post on YouTube yesterday and I watched it 4 times because I couldn't believe that it was actually real. But it was a post of a woman, Israeli woman. I can't figure out if she's religious or not. It doesn't matter. Perhaps she left it like that in order to be vague. And she's telling her children and recording it live that her and her husband are getting divorced. And I was so aghast that a parent would record that live and put it into YouTube. Why would somebody do that? And so when you're talking about education, psychoeducation, number 1, right? Number 1, put your children first. You have to be in tune to what are the needs of the children. You're entitled to get divorced. Nobody can force you to stay married to anybody. And again, I don't believe that divorce is what really causes emotional damage. It's how people get divorced and how they relate to their ex afterwards.
It's such an interesting uh, example you just brought, because the virtual mechanisms and systems that we have in modern day also become triangulated. YouTube became a triangulation.
Wow, that's such a good point. So now the whole world can be involved in that.
Digitalized. It's like, yeah, the whole, and somehow she got legitimacy through that virtual audience of the world, when what she needed to do is, work this out with your husband. How are you going to do it? Like, when I got trained in mediation work, we would get very clear guidance of, how to tell kids.
Yeah.
At what stage should you tell kids? How much before divorce? Um, where do you sit in the house together? Can you sit together? Who's going to speak? And what do you imagine the kids, how they would react? Could you contain the reaction? Could you let them cry? Could you let there be a mourning process? Yet say, if you're okay, that we're okay. Abba or Ima has a house. We have an apartment. I'm going to show you where I'm living. We're going to continue as to be your parents always. We never divorce you. We're always together as one in your heart. Big people, adults, can get divorced for many reasons, and we felt this would be better for us. And be prepared. And then part of the educational process would be prepare for the kids to be angry and to be hurt, and
not to tell them they have no right to be angry. They do have a right to be angry.
Have a right to be angry, and they're going to be angry at both parents, and don't get into a competition. Don't get triggered to blame all these things that often you have, the finger pointing at who initiated the divorce, and we know there are a lot of collusive elements. Whoever makes the decision to get divorced.
And you know what? And I tell this to my clients also sometimes, that you have sometimes that one parent did something which was, they cheated. Okay, here's an example. Let's say a woman cheated, right? And so the husband said, that's it, we're getting divorced, right? I'm not getting into the halachic aspects of that.
Okay.
Let's just say we're putting halach on the side, and that's it, we're getting divorced. So I've seen in these kinds of instances that the father is very tempted to tell the children, it's your mother's fault, right? She did this.
Right.
And he feels very justified in saying that she did this, right? Because she cheated. And he can't look at a second for himself and saying, what drove her to cheat?
Yeah.
Where am I in the picture?
Yeah. And he also has a halachic anchor that could use, talking about saying
right.
that I'm not allowed to even.
Right. I have to. I have no choice. Right. And
right.
A, that's none of the children's business.
Yeah.
And B, he has no ability to self-reflect and say, wait a second, how did
that's right.
How did our relationship deteriorate so much that she would cheat?
Yeah. So yeah, exactly. And so working.
I'm not just disclaimer. I'm not justifying cheating here.
Of course.
But I'm saying when somebody does cheat, it didn't happen in a vacuum.
So it's very important about what you're saying in terms of when, again, the model of a healthier couple would be, what your kid's going to ask you why you're getting divorced. And you have a right to privacy. You don't have to reveal and disclose all of the details, but you should find a collective term. When they get older, they might ask you other questions, but what led to so you were asking now, if I was working with the parents, what was missing in the relationship? So we didn't have communication. That's what are the reasons that led to the cheating in this case? And what could you tag that term with? What does that mean about your relationship? Yeah, we didn't really tell each other what bothered us. We learned how to swallow it, and I was scared the other person, how they would react. We couldn't communicate. So okay, you have to say we weren't able to. communicate to each other. And you don't have to be like when you get older. It's very important to learn how to communicate because we didn't do it well. So parents also learning how to accept the failure of this. I'll use the word failure. That nice term, maybe we discussed it last time about a conscious, no, what is it called? It's another term for a divorce. A conscious, unwavering. No, I forgot exactly the term. Is evading.
Right. I remember we talked about it, and I said it. Oh, in Yiddish, that would be called an ois chasna. But
Right.
I can't remember what the term you used was.
Right.
Decoupling.
Decoupling. Kol hakavod. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, decoupling. Decoupling means, and conscious decoupling means we're taking this process as part of life's journey together, and we learned things. There are sad things, but what have we learned? What have we taken? We're still going to live. We're going on. Parshat Yosef, right? We're now up to these all about these family problems that erupted, and and there was this perspective that there was, that God is up there directing things, and you could use that in saying, okay, so we met together. Was it a mistake? Was everything a mistake? What was missing in our relationship that we could forgive each other with, that we could take ownership? What did we each contribute to the falling for the frustration of this relationship that led to the dissolution of this relationship? So those are the kind of positive models that we need, even though you might be up against a very difficult, even though the cases that we're discussing, because these high conflict cases leave you so frustrated, and because there's very little growth in it. Right. It's usually a repetition of frustration and pain, and and you really need some kind of therapy there, and we're not doing therapy.
And they take years to resolve.
Years,
like 5-6 years to resolve.
Yeah, so that's why I put a lot of emphasis, if couples are able to, when they're in the clarification process of whether this relationship is working, not to immediately respond, to give time. Even if somebody is sure that they want to get divorced, take the time, go to a professional with your spouse and disclose, this is not working. I want to get a divorce. I feel like I need to get a divorce, and let the other go through some process and response, which may have elements of pain and anger and that, but if it's contained, you'll do better on the other side. If it's healthy enough.
Right. And even if you have a partner or an ex who's unhealthy, a person can still do the work themselves.
Yeah. Oh, then you have yeah. That's a good subject. What is the healthier party? How are they supposed to? I think we touched on this last time, of course, as well, about the demands that the healthier party needs to. I'll call it demands because they feel very troubled and angry that they're always in the position of feeling they have to be the larger person. But if you are healthier and you're in this kind of situation, at the end of the day, healthier means I want to save time, energy, and I want to save my kids. So how do I need to progress? How do I need to strategize often with this impossible personality? How do I build resilience in myself to know how to deal with it? Shoshana, I think
okay, we're out of time. Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
If we need to, I'm looking forward to meeting you in person at the conference.
Absolutely. Yes.
Divorcing with Dignity, January 28th. And God willing, I'll introduce you to the Dayan from the rabbinate who's going to be there, from the Rav Ralbag.
Okay.
He's the Rabbin of Yerushalayim. He's the last speaker. And I think he would value your work a lot, and I think you would value his work and his crusade against parental alienation.
I think he's, I know him through his cases that I'm working with, some cases right now, but it'd be wonderful to meet him, and Batzlachan, Kol HaKavod, that you're picking this up and launching this thing. It's so important. And
Bezrat Hashem.
yeah.
Okay, thank you so
All
much.
the best. Okay, thank you. Bye-bye. All the best.